to all the souls seeking silence in the night. This is Silent Night Narrator. Tonight, as the world drifts into slumber and the rain taps gently on your window, let this true tale guide you into a darker realm, where the line between what is and what might be becomes unclear. Breathe in, relax, but don't close your eyes too quickly, for sometimes true fear whispers right at the edge of your dreams. The echoing peaks. The Solstice Lodge stood at the end of a forgotten road, nestled deep within the whispering peaks, a place Elias Thorne had meticulously charted on paper long before his old sedan sputtered its last breath on the gravel driveway. He was a cartographer of the lost, a historian of forgotten paths, drawn to the enigmatic allure of places that whispered secrets only to those who truly listened. The lodge, a relic of late 19th century grandeur, promised profound stillness, a sanctuary where the world's clamor faded into the hum of ancient mountains. But as he stepped out, the air was unnaturally still, the silence too absolute, swallowing the crunch of his boots as if the very atmosphere yearned for quietude. A slender woman, with a smile that barely touched her unsettlingly pale eyes, greeted him at the massive oak door. "Mr. Thorne, you're precisely on time," she chimed, her voice a low, melodious whisper that seemed to echo inside his skull. "We've been expecting you." Her name was Alara Marrow, and her husband Silas, a man with hands like gnarled roots and a gaze that felt too heavy, emerged from the shadows behind her. Elias hadn't specified his arrival time, nor given details beyond his name. A prickle of unease snaked up his spine, a feeling he attributed to the long drive and the lodge's imposing antiquity. "Welcome to Solstice Lodge," Silas rumbled, his voice like stones tumbling down a mountainside. "Many have sought the solace of these peaks, but few truly find it." His smile was wide, amiable, yet something in his eyes, pale and unblinking, hinted at a deeper, colder current beneath the surface. The interior of the lodge was a labyrinth of dark wood and heavy tapestries, illuminated by flickering gas lamps that cast dancing shadows Elias couldn't quite account for. Despite the advertisement boasting fully booked status, the lodge was eerily empty. His footsteps, usually resonating, were muffled, absorbed by the oppressive stillness. Alara led him to his room, a cavernous space on the third floor adorned with intricate carvings on the bedposts and window frames. They depicted spiraling patterns, jagged peaks, and figures that seemed to shift, coalesce, and dissipate as he looked at them. "A local artist's work," Alara explained, her whisper seeming to linger in the air. "They say these mountains have a way of inspiring or keeping you." The last words were spoken with a peculiar emphasis that sent a shiver down his spine. That night, sleep proved elusive. Every creak of the old lodge, every whisper of the wind outside, sounded unnaturally loud. He saw movement in the corner of his eye, fleeting shadows in the mirrors that didn't quite match his own reflection. Objects he was certain he'd left on the dresser appeared on the nightstand. Elias, a man of precise order, tried to rationalize it all. Old house settling, fatigue, an overactive imagination fueled by the isolation. He spent the next few days meticulously exploring the surrounding trails, his professional equipment his only companion. But his GPS unit was stubbornly dead, and his compass spun wildly, defying magnetic north. The trails themselves seemed to play tricks on him. A familiar bend would suddenly lead to an unfamiliar ravine. A clear path would narrow into an impassable thicket. He found himself looping back to the same ancient oak, despite hours of determined hiking. The forest felt alive, pressing in, its silence watchful. He felt an undeniable sense of being watched, not by animals, but by something far older and more patient. During one frustrated return to the lodge, he stumbled upon a small, derelict study on the ground floor, clearly untouched by the Marrow's meticulous upkeep. Hidden beneath a pile of crumbling maps, Elias found a leather-bound journal. Its brittle pages, filled with spidery, frantic handwriting, belonged to a previous guest, a cartographer named Alistair Finch, who had checked into the lodge nearly a century ago. Finch's early entries mirrored Elias's own initial observations: the unsettling silence, the Marrow's unnerving hospitality, the shifting carvings. But, as the journal progressed, Finch's sanity unraveled. He wrote of the living architecture of the lodge, of the mountain's insidious hunger, and of paths that twist not in space, but in reality. Finch detailed impossible sounds, reflections that showed other times, and a growing obsession with joining the mountain's stillness. His later entries were a frantic, incoherent scrawl, mentioning the ritual, the sacrifice, and a chilling phrase, "They want to chart us." The journal ended abruptly with a smeared, barely legible note. The fracture, in the pattern, the blind spot. Find it before you become another peak. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Elias's carefully constructed calm. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. He confronted Alara and Silas that evening, the journal clutched in his trembling hand. Their polite smiles didn't waver, but their eyes, now devoid of any human warmth, seemed to glow with a pale inner light. "A fascinating relic, isn't it?" Alara whispered, her gaze fixed on the journal. Mr. Finch truly understood the spirit of the peaks. He chose to become part of them. "What are you talking about?" Elias demanded, his voice cracking. "What is this place? What did you do to him?" Silas stepped forward, his towering form seeming to blur at the edges. "This lodge, young cartographer, is not merely a place, it is a threshold. And the mountain, it is ancient. It hungers for understanding, for the minds that seek to map its depths. Your meticulous mind, your desire to uncover forgotten paths. The mountain chose you long ago." A chilling, low chuckle echoed through the now distorted dining room. The intricate carvings on the walls began to pulse, lines of light tracing their patterns, revealing fleeting glimpses of gaunt, desperate faces trapped within the wood. The Marrows began to chant in a language Elias didn't recognize, a discordant harmony that made his head spin. The lodge around them began to warp, the walls melting away into a vast, starry void superimposed over the familiar furnishings. "We are the mountain's echoes, its stewards," Alara explained, her voice reverberating through the impossible space. "We guide those who are chosen, those who possess the perception to see beyond the veil to their rightful place. You, Elias Thorne, will become one with the peaks, your consciousness eternally charting its infinite, shifting realities." Elias felt a terrifying pull, a sensation of his very essence being stretched, absorbed. He saw glimpses of other worlds, other times, superimposed over his own, a dizzying cacophony of existence. He was not just lost. He was about to be integrated. He lunged for the door, but his hands passed right through it, only to find himself back in the center of the room. The Marrows closed in, their forms shifting, revealing sinews of rock and ancient bark beneath their skin. Then, Finch's last frantic words echoed in his mind. The fracture, in the pattern, the blind spot. Elias, a cartographer to his core, had spent his life searching for anomalies, for the imperfections in grand designs. He knew that even the most intricate map, had a margin of error, a seam. He frantically scanned the swirling, living carvings around him, searching for a flaw, a disruption in the rhythm of their ancient power. His eyes fell upon a small, innocuous knot in the dark wood of a pillar, a slight deviation from the perfect symmetry of the surrounding pattern. It was a subtle flaw, easily overlooked, a blind spot in the mountain's grand design. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, Elias pulled a small silver surveying prism from his pocket, a tool he always carried. He thrust it forward, aiming its sharpest edge directly at the knot, focusing his intent, his will to map and understand, not to be consumed. The moment the prism's tip touched the imperfection, a deafening crack split the air, and the ground beneath them began to tremble violently. The marrows let out inhuman shrieks, their forms contorting, seeming to tear apart from the inside. The entire lodge shuddered, the walls rippling like disturbed water. The impossible starry void collapsed, replaced by the familiar, yet now fractured walls of the lodge. "Run!" Alara shrieked, her voice no longer melodious but filled with raw, agonized terror. Elias didn't wait. He bolted for the door, which now, miraculously, felt solid. He threw himself outside, gasping in the crisp mountain air. The lodge behind him groaned, its foundations visibly shifting, sections of its grand facade dissolving into swirling mist as if it were unmaking itself. He scrambled into his car, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life on the first try, a miracle in itself. He floored the accelerator, tires spitting gravel as he sped down the dirt road, not daring to look back. In his rearview mirror, he caught a final glimpse of the Solstice Lodge. It wasn't crumbling. It was simply gone, replaced by the dense, silent forest. Elias drove for hours, not stopping until the first rays of dawn painted the sky a hopeful, ordinary blue. He was physically unharmed, but irrevocably changed. The world he had known, meticulously mapped and understood, was now riddled with unseen seams. He could perceive the thinness of reality now, fleeting glimpses of other dimensions bleeding into his own, the faint, persistent hum of hungry forces in the periphery of his senses. He never returned to the Whispering Peaks. The local authorities, when he finally reported his ordeal, found no trace of the lodge or the Marrows. Just an empty stretch of mountain road that seemingly led nowhere. They attributed his story to exhaustion and a vivid imagination. But Elias Thorne was no longer just a cartographer of lost trails. He became a silent watcher, a wanderer who now charted the unseen. He drifted from place to place, always drawn to remote corners, to old buildings, to quiet towns. He learned to identify the subtle signs, the unnatural silence, the shifting patterns in old architecture, the unsettling smiles of those who seemed to be waiting. He knew that the mountain's hunger, though momentarily averted, was an eternal force, always seeking a new consciousness to absorb. Sometimes, late at night, in the deepest quiet, he swore he could hear a faint, distant whisper, like the rustling of ancient leaves in the peaks, calling his name, inviting him back to chart the true, boundless, and terrifying expanse of what lay beyond. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that the map of his life had been rewritten, and his journey into the echoing peaks of unseen realities had only just begun. The pursuit would always be there, a shadow at the edge of his vision, a whisper in the silence. But he was charting a different course now, navigating not just land, but the very fabric of existence, a cartographer of the terrifying unknown. Sleep well tonight. And if you hear footsteps next door, just remember, it's only the rain. But if, when the story ends, you still hear it falling, know this: